Hello, folks. I am Leanne, professor of theology and history at Harvard, and welcome to Bible Simplified. Over the next sessions, we are going to embark on one of the most significant journeys in human history. This is not just a story, it is the foundation. It is the architectural blueprint for the relationship between God and humanity. We are going to study the life of Abram, a man called by God to leave everything familiar behind and step into a promise so vast it would ultimately bless every family on earth. Before we hear that call, we need to understand the world Abram, then known as Abram, was stepping out of. We travel back in time to around 2000 BC to the city of Ur in Mesopotamia. Modern archaeology, thanks to the work of figures like Sir Leonard Woolley, who excavated Ur in the 1920s, reveals this was not a primitive settlement. It was a metropolis, a center of global commerce, culture, and technological advancement for its time. Imagine a city with a complex system of laws, multi-story buildings, sophisticated mathematics, and a thriving literary tradition. At its heart stood the Great Ziggurat, a massive tiered temple pyramid dedicated to Nana, the moon god. This structure dominated the skyline, a physical testament to the city's religious devotion. Abram's world was polytheistic. People worshipped a pantheon of gods, each with their own domain, gods of the sun, wind, water, and harvest. Life was about appeasing these deities, navigating their moods, and seeking their favor through intricate rituals. The prevailing worldview was what scholars like Dr. John Walton call a functional ontology. The universe was a state, and the gods were the bureaucrats running its departments. Meaning was found in maintaining your place within this cosmic bureaucracy. Into this sophisticated, structured, and spiritually complex world, a different voice spoke. Not the voice of a departmental God, but the voice of the one God who created all departments, the voice of Yahweh. The call, recorded in Genesis chapter 12, is deceptively simple, yet utterly radical. Let us read it carefully. The Lord had said to Abram, "Go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you." Let us deconstruct the weight of this command. In the ancient Near East, your identity was not individual, it was collective. Your security, your status, your very sense of self was woven into the fabric of your extended family, your clan, and your city. To leave your father's household was to sever your primary source of protection, inheritance, and social standing. It was a form of social and economic suicide. God was not just asking Abram to change his address. He was asking him to dismantle his entire framework of meaning and security. And notice the ambiguity of the destination. The land I will show you. No map, no GPS coordinates, no detailed itinerary. It was a call to follow a person, not a plan. It was an invitation into a relationship based on trust, not a transaction based on certainty. This is the first and most fundamental lesson of faith. Obedience often precedes understanding. But the command is never given without a promise. And what a promise it is. It unfolds in 7 distinct parts in verses 2 and 3. Let us break down this sevenfold blessing because it becomes the covenant backbone of the entire Bible. First, I will make you into a great nation. This is the promise of significance. From one man would come an entire people. This was a direct answer to the deepest longing for legacy in the ancient world. Second, I will bless you. This is the promise of personal favor and provision. God's hand of goodness would be upon Abram's life. Third, I will make your name great. In a culture obsessed with honor and reputation, this was the promise of renown. His story would matter. Fourth, and you will be a blessing. This is the crucial pivot. The blessing is not for hoarding, but for channeling. Abram's life would become a conduit of God's goodness to others. Fifth, I will bless those who bless you. This establishes a principle of divine protection and partnership. To align with God's chosen is to align with God's blessing. Sixth, and whoever curses you, I will curse. This is the corollary, a warning of divine justice against opposition to God's purposes. And seventh, the climactic promise, and all peoples on earth will be blessed through you. This final promise is cosmic in its scope. In a world of tribal deities concerned with specific territories and peoples, the God of Abram declares his mission to be global. His plan, starting with one man and one family, was designed from the outset to encompass every nation, every ethnic group, every people group on the planet. This is the genesis of global missions. This is the thread that connects Abram directly to the Great Commission and the gospel of Jesus Christ. The entire biblical narrative flows from this stunning universal promise. Now, how does Abram respond? Verse 4 delivers one of the understated, yet most powerful statements of faith in all literature. So Abram went as the Lord had told him. The text records no debate, no negotiation, no request for clarification. At 75 years old, an age most would associate with retirement, not radical rebeginnings, Abram packs up his life. He takes his wife Sarai, his nephew Lot, all the possessions they have accumulated in Haran, and the people they have acquired, and they set out. The writer of Hebrews in the New Testament comments on this moment, saying, "By faith Abraham, when called to go to a place he would later receive as his inheritance, obeyed and went, even though he did not know where he was going." This is the prototype of saving faith. It is a faith that acts. It is a faith that trusts the character of the God who calls, even when the circumstances are confusing. Abram's journey teaches us a timeless principle. God's calling always requires a leaving before we can experience the receiving. We must release our grip on one shore to lay hold to the next. His journey leads him and his entourage into the land of Canaan. But when he arrives, the promise confronts a stark reality. Verse 6 tells us, Abram traveled through the land as far as the site of the great tree of Moreh in Shechem. At that time, the Canaanites were in the land. This is a crucial theological detail. God's promises are often fulfilled in the presence of opposition, not in the absence of it. The promised land was not empty. It was occupied by powerful, established people groups with their own cultures, armies, and gods. There would be giants to face, battles to fight, and challenges to overcome. This remains true in the spiritual life. God's calling often leads us directly into contested territory, where we must learn to possess the promises of God by faith while navigating real-world obstacles. But notice Abram's first response upon entering the land. Verse 7 says, "The Lord appeared to Abram and said, 'To your offspring I will give you this land.' So he built an altar to the Lord who had appeared to him." His first act is not conquest, not strategy, not anxious calculation. It is worship. He builds an altar. This is profoundly significant. In a land full of altars to Baal, Asherah, and El, Abram builds an altar to Yahweh. He is publicly staking a claim, not with a sword, but with sacrifice and praise. He is declaring that this land belongs to his God. Worship is the proper foundation for possessing God's promises. From Shechem, he moves on, pitching his tent between Bethel and Ai. And again, verse 8 tells us, he built an altar to the Lord and called on the name of the Lord. A pattern is established. Obedience leads him to a new place. God meets him there, and Abram responds with worship. His life becomes a journey marked by altars, physical reminders of encounters with the living God. This pattern is a model for our own spiritual journey. Our lives should be marked by altars, moments, and memorials where we can look back and say, "Here, I met with God. Here, I worshiped Him. Here, I remembered His faithfulness." But soon, the faith that was tested by obedience is tested by circumstance. Verse 10 delivers a sudden, stark contrast. Now there was a famine in the land. A famine in the promised land? This is a profound crisis. If God called him here, why is there no food? If this is the place of blessing, why is there scarcity? This is the tension every believer faces. The tension between the promise of God and the reality of our present circumstances. How will Abram respond?
The test of prosperity, when blessing causes friction. Welcome back. When we left Abram, he had just returned from a disastrous, faithless detour to Egypt. He had been humiliated by Pharaoh, but miraculously protected and enriched by God's grace. Now he is back at the altar between Bethel and Ai, the place of his original worship and calling. He is recentering himself, calling on the name of the Lord. It is a moment of spiritual recovery. But now a new challenge emerges, one born not from famine, but from fulfillment, from the very blessing God had promised him. We pick up the story in Genesis 13, verse 5. Now Lot, who was traveling with Abram, also had flocks and herds and tents. But the land could not support them while they stayed together, for their possessions were so great that they were not able to stay together. The blessing of God has become a logistical problem. The grass is being overgrazed, water sources are strained. This is a first world problem on a biblical scale, and it leads to conflict. Verse 7. And quarreling arose between Abram's herders and Lot's herders. The friction starts at the employee level, but it undoubtedly seeped up to the family level. The atmosphere is tense. The unity of the clan is fracturing under the weight of its own success. Here we see a profound principle. God's blessings are good, but they require wisdom and often sacrifice to manage. Unmanaged blessing can lead to strife, envy, and division. Now Abram, as the patriarch, the senior leader, has every right to dictate terms. The cultural expectation would be for him to pull rank. He could have said, "Lot, I am your uncle. I brought you out of Haran. Without me, you would have nothing. Your men need to fall in line, or you can take your flocks and find less desirable pasture." That would have been his prerogative. But Abram does something extraordinary. He demonstrates a different kind of strength, the strength of humility and peacemaking. He takes the initiative to resolve the conflict. Verse 8. So Abram said to Lot, "Let us not have any quarreling between you and me, or between your herders and mine, for we are close relatives." The Hebrew word for close relatives here is achim, brothers. He appeals to their relationship. He refuses to let material possessions destroy a family bond. This is a radical act in a culture where honor and wealth were paramount. Then he makes an astonishing proposal. Verse 9, "Is not the whole land before you? Let us part company. If you go to the left, I will go to the right. If you go to the right, I will go to the left." Abram relinquishes his right of first choice. He, the one called by God, the one to whom the entire land was promised, gives the choice to his nephew. This is a massive risk. What if Lot chooses the best part? What if he chooses the part God specifically intended for Abram? Abram is operating on a powerful conviction that his destiny is not determined by the quality of the real estate, but by the faithfulness of his God. He trusts that the God who called him will bless him wherever he ends up, even if it is on the less desirable side of the tracks. So Lot, presented with this generous offer, does what any shrewd, worldly-minded person would do. He chooses the best land for himself. Verses 10 and 11. Lot looked around and saw that the whole plain of the Jordan, toward Zoar was well-watered, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt. This was before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. So Lot chose for himself the whole plain of the Jordan and set out toward the east. The two men parted company. The text offers a telling description. The plain of the Jordan was like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt. Both are powerful symbolic comparisons. The garden of the Lord is Eden, a place of paradise and God's presence. The land of Egypt is a place of worldly abundance, but also of slavery and opposition to God. The text is subtly framing Lot's choice. He sees the land, but he does not seek the Lord. He sees the fertility, but he is blind to the spiritual danger. He is drawn by what looks good and prosperous to the human eye. And the final, chilling note: he set out toward the east. For listeners familiar with the Genesis narrative, moving east often carries a negative connotation. Adam and Eve were exiled east of Eden. Cain was sent further east after killing Abel. Now Lot moves east, away from the center of God's promise, toward the cities of the plain, which are about to become infamous. Abram lived in the land of Canaan, while Lot lived among the cities of the plain and pitched his tents near Sodom. Now the people of Sodom were wicked and were sinning greatly against the Lord. Lot's journey is a slow drift into compromise. He starts by looking toward Sodom, then pitching his tents near Sodom, and as we will see later, he ends up living in Sodom, even becoming a city elder. This is the anatomy of spiritual decline. It is rarely a single dramatic leap into sin, but a series of small, logical, comfortable steps toward the attractive but toxic culture. Now Abram, as the patriarch, the senior leader, has every right to dictate terms. The cultural expectation would be for him to pull rank. He could have said, "Lot, I am your uncle. I brought you out of Haran. Without me, you would have nothing. Your men need to fall in line, or you can take your flocks and find less desirable pasture." That would have been his prerogative. But Abram does something extraordinary. He demonstrates a different kind of strength, the strength of humility and peacemaking. He takes the initiative to resolve the conflict. Verse 8, "So Abram said to Lot, 'Let us not have any quarreling between you and me, or between your herders and mine, for we are close relatives.'" The Hebrew word for close relatives here is achim, brothers. He appeals to their relationship. He refuses to let material possessions destroy a family bond. This is a radical act in a culture where honor and wealth were paramount. Then he makes an astonishing proposal. Verse 9, "Is not the whole land before you? Let us part company. If you go to the left, I will go to the right. If you go to the right, I will go to the left." Abram relinquishes his right of first choice. He, the one called by God, the one to whom the entire land was promised, gives the choice to his nephew. This is a massive risk. What if Lot chooses the best part? What if he chooses the part God specifically intended for Abram? Abram is operating on a powerful conviction that his destiny is not determined by the quality of the real estate, but by the faithfulness of his God. He trusts that the God who called him will bless him wherever he ends up, even if it is on the less desirable side of the tracks. So Lot, presented with this generous offer, does what any shrewd, worldly-minded person would do. He chooses the best land for himself. Verses 10 and 11. Lot looked around and saw that the whole plain of the Jordan toward Zoar was well watered, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt. This was before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. So Lot chose for himself the whole plain of the Jordan and set out toward the east. The two men parted company. The text offers a telling description. The plain of the Jordan was like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt. Both are powerful symbolic comparisons. The garden of the Lord is Eden, a place of paradise and God's presence. The land of Egypt is a place of worldly abundance, but also of slavery and opposition to God. The text is subtly framing Lot's choice. He sees the land, but he does not seek the Lord. He sees the fertility, but he is blind to the spiritual danger. He is drawn by what looks good and prosperous to the human eye. And the final, chilling note: he set out toward the east. For listeners familiar with the Genesis narrative, moving east often carries a negative connotation. Adam and Eve were exiled east of Eden. Cain was sent further east after killing Abel. Now Lot moves east, away from the center of God's promise, toward the cities of the plain, which are about to become infamous. Abram lived in the land of Canaan, while Lot lived among the cities of the plain and pitched his tents near Sodom. Now the people of Sodom were wicked and were sinning greatly against the Lord. Lot's journey is a slow drift into compromise. He starts by looking toward Sodom, then pitching his tents near Sodom, and as we will see later, he ends up living in Sodom, even becoming a city elder. This is the anatomy of spiritual decline. It is rarely a single dramatic leap into sin, but a series of small, logical, comfortable steps toward the attractive but toxic culture. Now Abram, as the patriarch, the senior leader, has every right to dictate terms. The cultural expectation would be for him to pull rank. He could have said, "Lot, I am your uncle. I brought you out of Haran." The test of conflict, rescuing Lot. But peace in the land of Canaan is short-lived. The consequences of Lot's choice soon come crashing down. Genesis 14 opens with the first recorded war in the Bible. A coalition of 4 kings from the east, led by the powerful Kedorlaomer, attacks the 5 kings of the cities of the plain, including the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah. The eastern coalition is victorious. Verse 12 delivers the personal blow. They also carried off Abram's nephew Lot and his possessions, since he was living in Sodom. Lot, who chose the well-watered plain for its security and prosperity, now finds himself a prisoner of war, his wealth plundered. His alignment with the wicked city has led to his capture. The world systems promise safety, but often deliver slavery. News reaches Abram, who is living in Hebron. The text calls him Abram the Hebrew. The term Hebrew likely means one who crosses over, or one from the other side, highlighting his status as an immigrant, an outsider. This outsider now becomes the only hope for the insiders. One who escaped the battle comes and tells Abram, and we see a different side of Abram, not just the man of faith and peace, but the man of action and courage. Verse 14, when Abram heard that his relative had been taken captive, he called out the 318 trained men born in his household and went in pursuit as far as Dan. Abram is not a helpless nomad. He is the chieftain of a small, well-trained, and loyal private army. He musters his forces and pursues the enemy coalition over a great distance. This is a daring, high-risk mission. He is taking his entire fighting force, the source of his security, to confront a coalition of armies that just defeated several Canaanite city-states. The strategy is brilliant. He divides his forces and attacks at night, using the element of surprise. Verses 15 and 16. During the night, Abram divided his men to attack them, and he routed them, pursuing them as far as Hobah, north of Damascus. He recovered all the goods and brought back his relative Lot and his possessions, together with the women and the other people. It is a complete and stunning victory. The one who trusted God for his inheritance now demonstrates that faith produces courage and strategic wisdom. He rescues not only Lot, but all the people and plunder from Sodom. On his return, he is met by 2 kings. The king of Sodom comes out to thank him, and a mysterious, magnificent figure also appears, Melchizedek. Verse 18, Then Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. He was priest of God Most High. This is a pivotal, almost mysterious moment. Melchizedek's name means King of Righteousness. He is the King of Salem, which means peace, and is the early name for Jerusalem. So he is the King of Righteousness and Peace, and his title is Priest of God Most High, El Elyon. He is a priest-king, a figure who points forward centuries later to Jesus Christ himself. And what does Melchizedek do? He does not ask for anything. He blesses Abram. Verse 19, And he blessed Abram, saying, Blessed be Abram by God Most High, Creator of heaven and earth, and praise be to God Most High, who delivered your enemies into your hand. Melchizedek redirects the glory for the victory to its proper source, God Most High, the Creator of heaven and earth. He affirms that the victory was God's doing. In response, Abram gives Melchizedek a tenth of everything. This is the first mention of tithing in the Bible. It is an act of worship, acknowledging God's supreme ownership and Melchizedek's God-ordained priesthood. Now contrast this with the king of Sodom. He comes with a transactional offer. Verse 21, The king of Sodom said to Abram, Give me the people, and keep the goods for yourself. It sounds generous. Keep the plunder, just give me my people back. This is a test of a different kind, the test of wealth and honor. Accepting this offer would make Abram incredibly wealthy and put the king of Sodom in his debt. It would tie Abram's fortune to the wicked city of Sodom. But Abram's response is a powerful declaration of integrity and faith. Verses 22 through 24. But Abram said to the king of Sodom, With raised hand I have sworn an oath to the Lord, God Most High, Creator of heaven and earth, that I will accept nothing belonging to you, not even a thread or the strap of a sandal, so that you will never be able to say, I made Abram rich. I will accept nothing but what my men have eaten and the share that belongs to the men who went with me. This is a stunning refusal. Abram will not allow his wealth and testimony to be tainted by the king of Sodom. He will not let the world say, We made the man of God rich. His prosperity must come clearly and solely from the hand of the Lord. He trusts God's promise to bless him, and he will not compromise that trust for a shortcut to wealth. This moment is a high watermark in Abram's faith. He has demonstrated courage in battle, worship in victory, and integrity in the face of temptation. He is learning to walk in the promise, not by his own cunning, but by radical dependence on God.
The test of time, the covenant formalized. After these dramatic events, we come to Genesis 15. This is one of the most theologically rich chapters in the entire Old Testament. The word of the Lord comes to Abram in a vision, and for the first time, we hear a note of vulnerability, of human struggle, from the great patriarch. God opened with words of comfort and assurance. Do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield, your very great reward. But Abram's response is raw and honest. Verse 2, But Abram said, Sovereign Lord, what can you give me since I remain childless? And the one who will inherit my estate is Eliezer of Damascus. Abram said, You have given me no children, so a servant in my household will be my heir. This is the cry of a heart that has been waiting. The promise of offspring like the dust of the earth must have felt increasingly distant. Every sunrise was a reminder that he and Sarai were not getting any younger. The pain of unfulfilled promise was becoming acute. Sovereign Lord, you have given me no children. It is a prayer of lament, not of defiance. It is faith wrestling with reality. And God's response is immediate and breathtaking. Verse 4, Then the word of the Lord came to him. This man will not be your heir, but a son who is your own flesh and blood will be your heir. He reaffirms the promise in the most personal terms, not an adopted servant, but your own son. Then, to drive the point home, God does something incredible. He takes Abram outside and says, "Look up at the sky and count the stars, if indeed you can count them." Then he said to him, "So shall your offspring be." He moves the metaphor from the dust of the earth to the stars of the heavens, from the mundane to the majestic. And in this moment, something pivotal happens in Abram's heart. Verse 6, a verse that would echo through the ages and become the cornerstone of the Apostle Paul's theology of justification by faith. Abram believed the Lord, and he credited it to him as righteousness. Let us unpack this profound statement. Abram believed. The Hebrew word he'emin implies trust, reliance, placing his full weight upon the promise. He did not just agree intellectually, he staked his life on it. He trusted the character of the promiser. And God credited it to him as righteousness. Righteousness is a legal and relational term meaning right standing. It is being in a correct, approved relationship with God. Abram did not earn this right standing through perfect behavior. We have already seen his failures. He did not achieve it through ritual or law-keeping. He received it as a gift, through faith. God, in his grace, counted Abram's faith as righteousness. This is the glorious, foundational truth of the gospel, revealed here in the Old Testament. We are made right with God by faith, not by works. But Abram, in his humanity, still seeks reassurance. "How can I know that I will gain possession of it?" he asked in verse 8. God's response is to formalize his promise through an ancient, solemn ritual known as a covenant ceremony. He instructs Abram to bring specific animals: a heifer, a goat, a ram, a dove, and a pigeon. Abram cuts the larger animals in half and arranges the halves opposite each other with a path between them. In the ancient Near East, making a covenant involved walking between the pieces of slaughtered animals. It was a self-maledictory oath, meaning the parties were saying, "May what happened to these animals happen to me if I break this covenant." It was the most binding of all agreements. But as evening falls, something strange happens. A deep and dreadful darkness falls upon Abram. Then a smoking firepot with a blazing torch appears and passes between the pieces of the animals. But notice, Abram is not asked to walk. Only the symbols of God's presence, the smoking firepot and the blazing torch, pass through. This is of monumental significance. God is making a unilateral, unconditional covenant. He is putting the entire obligation on himself. He is saying, "Abram, my promise to you does not depend on your performance. If this covenant is broken, may I be torn apart like these animals. I will fulfill my word to you by my own power and faithfulness." Then, in the context of this awe-inspiring ceremony, God reveals the future to Abram with startling specificity. He tells him that his descendants will be strangers in a country not their own, and they will be enslaved and mistreated for 400 years. But God will punish that nation, and they will come out with great possessions. He also tells Abram that he himself will die in peace at a good old age. This is both a promise and a warning. The promise of a great nation is sure, but the path to that promise will go through the furnace of suffering. God's promises are not a guarantee of a pain-free life, but they are a guarantee of his faithful presence and ultimate deliverance. With the covenant formalized, the promise seems more secure than ever. But years continue to pass. No child arrives. The silence must have been deafening. The tension between the spectacular promise and the stubborn reality was stretching their faith to the breaking point. It is in this context of weary waiting that we encounter one of the most tragic and instructive episodes in Abram's story: the attempt to help God out.
The test of haste. Hagar and Ishmael.
13 years of silence are broken in Genesis chapter 17. Abram is now 99 years old. The promise of a son from his own body seems more ludicrous than ever. And then God appears to him again. The introduction is profound. I am God Almighty. Walk before me faithfully and be blameless. God reveals himself by a new name, El Shaddai, God Almighty. This name signifies God's ultimate power, his sufficiency, his ability to do the impossible, and to nourish and sustain his people. It is the name needed when all human strength has failed. God then says, "Then I will make my covenant between me and you, and will greatly increase your numbers." And in this moment, God does something transformative. He changes Abram's name. No longer will you be called Abram. Your name will be Abraham, for I have made you a father of many nations. Abram means exalted father. Abraham means father of a multitude. God changes his identity to align with the promise. Every time he hears his name, it is a declaration of faith. He is not just Abram, he is father of nations, even before he has a single legitimate heir. The covenant is not just for him. God establishes it as an everlasting covenant with Abraham and his descendants. And as a sign of this everlasting covenant, God institutes the practice of circumcision. Every male in Abram's household, including Ishmael and all the servants, is to be circumcised. It is a physical mark in the flesh, signifying a spiritual reality. They are set apart, cut off from the world, and belonging to the covenant community of God. But the biggest shock is yet to come. God turns his attention to Sarai, your wife. You are no longer to call her Sarai. Her name will be Sarah. I will bless her and will surely give you a son by her. I will bless her so that she will be the mother of nations. Kings of peoples will come from her. Sarai means my princess. Sarah means princess. Her identity is also elevated from a personal title to a universal one. She will be a princess to nations. And then God delivers the impossible promise with absolute clarity. She, the 90-year-old woman, will bear a son. Abraham's response is one of stunned disbelief. He falls face down and laughs. He says to himself, "Will a son be born to a man 100 years old? Will Sarah bear a child at the age of 90? In his mind, the logical solution is still Ishmael. If only Ishmael might live under your blessing. But God is unequivocal. Yes, but your wife Sarah will bear you a son, and you will call him Isaac. I will establish my covenant with him as an everlasting covenant for his descendants after him." Isaac. The name means he laughs. It will be a perpetual reminder of the laughter of disbelief that turned into the laughter of joy. And so we have reached the end of our journey with Abraham, the father of faith. My hope is that as we've walked together through every step of his story, you haven't just learned about a man who lived millennia ago, but you've seen yourself reflected in his struggles, his doubts, and most importantly, in his capacity to believe the impossible. The story of Abraham shows us that faith is not a final destination, but a road that is built with every yes given to God, with every altar built in the midst of uncertainty, with every trust placed in the character of the one who makes promises. Before we say goodbye, I, Liam, want to thank you for dedicating your time to dive into this foundational narrative with us. Your interest and your quest to understand more are what make this project special. You are the reason Bible Simplified exists. May Abraham's life not just be a memory, but an invitation for you too to hear God's call, to leave your personal herb behind and to trust in the one who is your shield and your very great reward. I'll see you on the next journey. Until then, keep walking by faith